There's nothing so disheartening as running out of food in the middle of nowhere. And what's worse is knowing that the supplies you do have won't last long at all. We've all heard of pioneers eating their oxen during cattle drives when meat was scarce. But imagine being 30 days into your trek west and having to kill your only source of sustenance. Well, some pioneers did just that. The rations for an average family heading west would be enough to sustain them for about 4 months. But that wasn't taking into account any mishaps along the way. A broken leg, a busted wagon wheel, or simply bad luck could mean the difference between life and death. When food got real low, pioneers became desperate. They ate berries, grasses, and roots. But that wasn't enough to keep everyone alive, so they started butchering their oxen. This created another problem, though. What do you do with the leftover hide? Well, pioneers developed a process for turning the hides into leather, which they used for new shoes or to patch up old ones. They also built sturdy whips from the tongues and used the brains for cleaning. Nothing went to waste. Even the bones were crushed up and ground into a powder to make broth or soup. But despite these efforts, many people still starved to death. As much as 15% of travelers died from lack of nutrition. That's why when you see a pioneer holding his arm up like this, he isn't raising his hands to hail a passing motorist. He's begging for help, pleading with God to give him strength for just one more day. Winter-esque shadow following the winding trails over the mountains was hard enough without the looming threat of winter bearing down on your neck. But here it was again. Now, there were two things you couldn't control: starvation and winter. There was no cure for either except time. Time, however, was something you didn't have a lot of, especially in the mountains. Rain fell, the temperature dropped, and snow began dusting the landscape. The higher you climbed, the colder it got. One traveler wrote, "We passed several graves of those who had died on the route, and it is a sad thing to see how many of these mounds are made by little children. As the weather grew colder, the pace quickened. People headed toward the Willamette Valley, where they hoped to find fertile land and build a life for themselves away from the hardships of the trail. But nature had other plans. Heavy rains turned mountain streams into raging torrents. Bridges washed away. The muddy trail dissolved into a soupy mess. Travelers slid and slipped on slick rocks. Those who fell broke bones or slipped into the icy river below. People had to abandon their wagons and push through on foot, sometimes wading through knee-deep water. Some traveled by night and slept during the day to avoid the bitter cold. Others huddled around dying campfires, praying for the sun to come back. For the first time since leaving Missouri, the pioneers had a deadline. They had to get to the valley before winter set in. Each day they pushed forward, pulling their wagons out of the mud and over the rocks. They pushed because winter was coming and there was nowhere else to go. For those who made it this far, a strange kind of hope started to take root. You'd survived the plains. You'd endured the heat, the boredom, the storms. Your wagon might have been creaky, your oxen thin, your boots nearly destroyed, but you were still moving forward. But as summer faded and September arrived, the final part of the Oregon Trail was no gentle ending. It was the most brutal chapter of all, the Blue Mountains, Oregon's last obstacle. Many pioneers believed once they crossed the Rockies, the worst was behind them. But then came the Blue Mountains, Oregon's final gatekeepers. These weren't towering peaks like the Rockies, but they were steep, rugged, and relentless. Wagon wheels cracked against boulders. Trails narrowed into one-wagon width ledges. The path twisted, dipped, and rose with cruel unpredictability. There were no grassy plains left to stretch out in, no easy days. Every step upward took more strength than the last. Some families ditched heavy belongings to lighten the load. Others had to walk their oxen backward up the hills, yoke by yoke, foot by foot. You didn't climb the Blue Mountains with optimism. You climbed them because there was no turning back. Throughout this journey, you probably lost a lot of family members to snake bites, cholera, or exhaustion. Maybe you even had to eat some of your oxen because there was no other food in sight. But now you're in the mountains and you don't want to lose anyone else. Not now when you're so close to the end. But there's always the risk of losing someone. On top of that, the constant strain of pulling your creaky wagon up over and around obstacles can break a person. If your spouse drops dead of a heart attack in the middle of the trail, you'll have to bury them in the dirt, pull out your spade, and keep moving west. There was no time to grieve. Winter was right behind you, nipping at your heels. And if you stopped, you froze, along the way, you might find abandoned belongings of others who didn't make it. Maybe you find a child's shoe lying by the side of the trail, or a half-buried Bible, or even a coffin. How much weight does a coffin weigh anyway? Enough to slow you down, but you don't stop. You keep pushing forward until you reach the summit. And when you do, you know you've made it. The worst is finally behind you. You've survived months of travel, dodging danger around every bend. You've fought off starvation and the biting winds of winter. You are exhausted. All you want to do is drop down on your knees and collapse onto the soft earth. You want to lay there, catch your breath, feel the sunshine warm your face, but you don't. Instead, you look at the road ahead and start walking toward the valley below, because when you stop, you might not start up again. And if you don't keep moving, winter catches up and buries you beneath the snow. The trip down the mountain is nearly as difficult as the climb up. The ground is slick with mud and rain, and the ruts are deep and treacherous. Wagons often overturn, spilling their contents onto the ground and giving tired oxen a chance to roll around in the mud. After weeks of eating nothing but dried meat, beans, and flour, this will be a welcome change of pace. But you don't stop. You shovel up the mud and try to salvage what you can. The road is too rough and the danger too great to rest. You have to get down the mountain and into the valley before winter really sets in. As you near the bottom, you can finally see the rolling grasslands of the Willamette Valley. Hope surges through you. You're almost there. You can see the end of the trail, but first you have to cross the Columbia River. The river is wide and the current swift. Many pioneers lost their lives trying to cross. Some wagons tipped over and sank without a trace. Others made it halfway across only to be swept back to shore. Still, you have to try. There are no roads across the river, no bridges, only a thin layer of ice starting to form in the shallows. You'll have to wait for someone else to cross and show you the way. Finally, a family appears on the other side. They wave to you, motioning for you to follow. They're making room in their campfire for you. You accept the invitation and hurry to join them. You need the warmth and the company. You need food and a place to sleep before continuing your journey. When the sun rises, you pack up and follow the others toward the river. Here goes nothing. The crossing isn't easy. The ice is thin and the current strong. You slip and fall into the freezing water. Your clothes grow heavy and your teeth chatter uncontrollably. But you pull yourself upright and wade deeper into the river. You inch forward, holding your nose shut and kicking your legs to keep from drowning. You're nearly there. The family on the other side reaches out and pulls you from the river. You stumble onto the bank, shivering and soaking wet. They hand you blankets and wrap you in furs. When you finally stop shaking, you realize you've made it. You survived the Oregon Trail. The hardest part of your journey is behind you. All that's left is the long walk into the Willamette Valley. You're one of the lucky ones. Only 10% of travelers who started the Oregon Trail ended up here. You've beat the odds. And now, with the fertile land spread out before you, you can begin to plan your future. Just remember, when you look back at the mountains behind you, don't let yourself think you can't be killed. You may have beaten the trail, but the wilderness doesn't care. The end of the trail had seemed so close, but when the wagon train reached the head of the Blue River Canyon, they found that their passage was blocked by rock and debris that had fallen from recent landslides. The river had risen and swollen, and there was no way to cross. It was then that sickness struck the camp, the same sickness that had been plaguing the other trains ever since they left the Missouri River behind. At first, the wagons had pulled apart, allowing space for air and light to reach those inside. Now they were being pushed together into tight clusters, huddling together for warmth, for comfort. People were too sick to cook, too tired to forage. They lay on blankets inside the wagons and dreamed of home. Now, though, that precious food supply dwindled. The flour was gone or spoiled. The bacon was mostly fat. Dried apples had long since disappeared. Some families had taken to boiling shoe leather, literally soaking strips of old boots just to chew something. Others foraged, gathering wild onions, digging roots, stripping bark, hunting, maybe, but in the mountains, wildlife was scarce, and you had no energy to chase it. Those who had traded wisely earlier in the journey were lucky. They might have a final stash of beans or dried corn. For the rest, the nights were long, the fire weak, and the stomachs empty. Then the weather turned. Autumn doesn't ask permission to arrive. First, it was the wind, then the colder nights, then the frost on your blanket in the morning. Soon, the first snowflakes fell, lightly at first, melting as they touched the canvas of the wagon or the heat of your face. But you knew what it meant. Snow in the mountains was no joke. It could trap wagons, freeze oxen, seal passes shut for months. You hurried, everyone did. And still, the trail remained blocked. Finally, a young man volunteered to go ahead and see if the road was open. You watched him pull his battered hat down over his ears and trudge off through the swirling snow. He returned an hour later, shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. "It's no use," he said. "We can't go forward. We can't go back. We're trapped." So they waited. Days turned into weeks. The weather grew steadily worse. The snow piled higher and higher, and the river rose and swelled, roaring hungrily below the bridge of broken wagons. Each day, more people died. Whole families were lost to the mountain sickness or the cold or hunger. But life, tenacious, stubborn thing, refused to end. There were children yet to be born, games yet to be played, stories yet to be told around a warm fire. So the survivors pressed on, determined to carve out an existence in this new place. You are about to embark on a perilous journey across America's heartland. A land of hardship and hope, where the path to survival is fraught with peril and the spirit of adventure burns brightly. On your journey, you will encounter challenges that test your resilience, choices that shape your destiny, and landscapes that leave you breathless. Before we begin, I want you to roll a 6-sided die. On a roll of 1, you were born into wealth and privilege. Though some would say your family name has seen better days, the money's not much of a stretch. On a roll of 2 or 3, you were born to a working family. Life's been tough, but you know honest work when you see it. On a roll of 4 or 5, you were born into poverty, but there was always enough. There was always a roof overhead and food to eat, kind of. On a roll of 6, you had a rough childhood, so rough that you ran away from home and have been surviving on your own ever since. Next, I want you to close your eyes and imagine yourself at age 10. What do you see? Are you playing a game with friends? Working alongside your father, hiding from your stepfather? Whatever you see, imagine it carefully and then write it down. Finally, I want you to think of an object you would like to find on your journey. Maybe it's a magical amulet that grants wishes, a mysterious map leading to untold riches, or even just a friendly face. Imagine holding that object in your hands. What does it feel like? What does it smell like? How do you know it's important? Write down your answer. Now, adventurers, it's time to set off on your journey. As you make your way across the untamed wilderness, you'll need to rely on your wits, your courage, and the strength of your spirit. Will you face your fears and embrace the unknown, or will you falter and fall to the challenges that lie ahead? Only you can decide. Are you ready? Let's play a game? The year is 1849. The call of adventure echoes across the plains, beckoning pioneers from the East Coast to seek their fortunes in the burgeoning settlements of Oregon country. With dreams of fertile lands and boundless opportunity, hundreds of thousands of Americans answered the call, embarking on a treacherous journey across the Great Plains and over the Rocky Mountains. As part of the Great Migration, you've joined a wagon train bound for Oregon territory. For weeks, you've traveled alongside dozens of other families, their hopes and fears mirroring your own. But now the trail has taken a sharp turn. The lush valleys and gentle rivers have been replaced by rugged canyons and unforgiving terrain. Suddenly, a cry rings out from the lead wagon: landslide! In a heartbeat, the earth gives way, sending tons of rock and soil crashing down, blocking your path forward. Trapped by the debris, you know that you must wait for help to arrive. Days turn into weeks, and supplies begin to dwindle. Morale among the settlers starts to fray at the edges. Some grow desperate, blaming each other for the misfortune. Tensions rise, threatening to boil over into chaos. In this pivotal moment, it's up to you to bring the community together. As the leader of one of the wagons, you must rally the settlers, restore order, and ensure their survival. Do you inspire them with words of hope and courage, or descend into the chaos, fanning the flames of discontent? Your decisions will determine not only their fate, but also your own. Before we continue, let me ask you a question. How do you handle situations when things aren't going well? Are you someone who stays calm and focused on solutions, or do you get easily overwhelmed and distracted by minor issues? Think about a time when you faced a setback or a challenge. How did you respond? Did you take charge and try to fix the situation, or did you feel helpless and hopeless? Your answer will play a key role in your journey, so choose wisely. To help you decide, consider the following. First, gather your fellow settlers. Talk to them, understand their needs and fears. Perhaps someone has a skill that can help: a doctor, a teacher, a hunter. Perhaps someone would benefit from guidance and support. Remember, everyone's situation is different. Each settler has their own story, worries, and hopes. Consider their individual perspectives before making any decisions. Next, evaluate your resources. What do you have to work with? Food, water, tools, medicine, skills. Assess your current situation honestly. It's important to be realistic about what you have available and what you need to survive. This will help you make informed decisions moving forward. And finally, look to the future. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? Keep your long-term objectives in mind as you make decisions in the present. Balancing immediate needs with future goals is crucial for your journey ahead. Your choices will have consequences. If you focus solely on the present, you may miss out on valuable opportunities. If you neglect the needs of your community, trust will crumble and unity will falter. But if you take a balanced approach, considering both immediate concerns and long-term goals while embracing the unique circumstances of each settler, you can navigate these challenges and lead your community towards a brighter future. Now it's time to act. What will you do to bring the community together and ensure their survival? Remember, your decisions will shape their fate. Make them wisely. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Oregon Trail. I hope you had as much fun reliving this historic adventure as I did creating it. Don't forget to subscribe for more exciting historical journeys. Until next time, happy trails, and remember, the best journeys are the ones you share with friends. Hey there, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to talk about what it would have been like to travel west on the Oregon Trail during the winter of 1849. The race wasn't just to reach Oregon. It was to outrun winter. Okay, let's go. You know, when people think of pioneers heading west along the Oregon Trail, they usually imagine summer. And that makes sense. Summers out west can be hot, but are usually pretty pleasant. But winters can be brutal. You probably don't want to spend one out on the trail unless you have to. Well, in 1849, thousands of immigrants did exactly that. They headed into the Rocky Mountains with winter fast approaching. This group was made up of several 100,000 people from Missouri to Oregon. And it was by far the largest migration in the history of the Oregon Trail. This mass migration wasn't spontaneous. The government had encouraged settlers to head west and take advantage of the newly negotiated Oregon Treaty. This treaty gave the United States claim to the entire Oregon Territory all the way to the south of the Columbia River. That meant settlers in Missouri were only about 2,000 miles away from the mouth of the Columbia River. So in 1849, thousands of families prepared to make the journey. Now, some of these folks were seasoned travelers. They'd been on the trail before, maybe even multiple times. Others had never traveled west of Missouri, and most had never traveled more than a few miles from their homes. But everyone wanted the same thing: new land and a fresh start. That fall, tens of thousands of immigrants headed west, racing the seasons. As you probably already know, the Oregon Trail didn't have too many well-defined routes, at least not at this time. There was no single path that ran the length of the trail. Instead, there were a series of paths and routes that immigrants followed from one supply depot to another. And because the majority of travel happened along rivers, there were dozens of ferry crossings and other routes along the riverbanks. So if you were traveling west in 1849, you likely had to find your own way, which was more easily done in the summer. But that year, fall arrived early and brought with it the first snows. For a moment, the weather held, giving travelers a reprieve and allowing them to keep moving west. But once the temperatures dropped below freezing, the journey became increasingly difficult. Along the Republican River, snow piled high, forcing travelers to abandon the river banks and search for higher ground. And on the North Platte River, wagons sometimes broke through the ice underneath and had to be abandoned. All the while, the thermometer continued its steady decline. And as the temperature dipped lower and lower, people began to panic. There wasn't much time left to get to Oregon before the snow did, and that meant everyone had to pick up the pace or risk spending the winter on the trail. As the weeks passed, wagons moved faster, making longer daily treks and covering more distance each day. As travelers raced west, they encountered scenes that made them stop and wonder about the fate of the previous travelers who had met the same challenges they now faced. Many of the covered wagons that stood abandoned on the trail were new. In fact, the vast majority were new, because the wagon you used to travel west was probably the most valuable possession you had. And so most people didn't want to abandon their wagons. They wanted to use them over and over again. And so this tells us that many of these immigrants had little choice but to abandon their wagons. They probably did so because their animals had died, leaving them with no way to move their families and supplies forward. Maybe their children were sick and there was no hope of reaching a settlement in time for medical help. Whatever the reason, every abandoned wagon was a graveyard of sorts for the hopes and dreams of the immigrant families who left them behind. And then there were the graves scattered along the trail, marking the spot where someone died trying to reach Oregon. Some of these graves belonged to children who didn't survive the long journey. Others belonged to adults who simply succumbed to disease, exhaustion, starvation, exposure. And as the weather grew colder and the bodies of the dead were buried under the snow, it seemed as though winter itself was claiming the travelers. Now, the winter of 1849 was one of the worst on record, and it wasn't just in the Oregon Territory. Heavy snowfall blanketed much of the United States, but unlike the immigrants on the Oregon Trail, most Americans could retreat indoors when the weather took a turn for the worse. Unfortunately, the immigrants couldn't do that. They had to press on, and as the temperature continued to drop, they began to feel the effects of the cold. traveling in such cold weather wasn't just hard on the body, it was hard on the mind as well. Now, a lot of the immigrants had left their homes in the spring, and so they'd spent almost a year traveling west. The novelty of frontier life had worn off a long time ago, and by now, many were exhausted. Not only were they tired of eating dried meat and hard bread, but they were also tired of sleeping in their wagons and doing little more than walking and cooking all day. They were tired of living on the edge of starvation, and now they were exhausted by the constant battle against the elements. It's no wonder that so many of them wanted to end their journey and settle down. But as the snow piled higher and the weather grew colder, they couldn't afford to rest. They had to keep moving, and then there was the isolation. Most of the immigrants traveled in groups, but even that didn't help much. After spending months with the same people, you really started to get on each other's nerves. And that is especially true when you reconfine to a wagon with your family and have nowhere to go to get away from them. If you are old enough, you might have tried to tough it out, but if you were young, you probably complained a lot. And if your parents were anything like mine, they probably said something to the effect of, "Quit whining, or I'm gonna give you something to cry about." And then they probably carried you out of the wagon, laid you down in the snow, and left you there until you understood what it meant to whine in the middle of the Oregon Trail in the winter. But perhaps the greatest challenge facing the immigrants was the condition of their animals. All throughout the journey, the oxen, cows, horses, and mules had endured heat, rain, snow, storms, swollen rivers, deep mud, and countless other challenges. But so far, they'd pulled through. However, by this point in the journey, the animals were exhausted and close to starvation. And after months of struggling to move their loads, the animals began to collapse. When that happened, the choices were grim. First, you could try to revive the animal. This involved pouring water over the animal to rehydrate it and waiting for it to recover. The problem with this option is that the immigrant didn't have a lot of extra water, and so that precious resource could be used up without reviving the animal. Your second option was to butcher the animal and eat it. This option seemed like a waste since so much of the journey still remained. But eventually, the immigrants did begin to run low on supplies, and this would become a necessary option. The third option was abandonment. You simply unhooked the animal and left it behind. This saved the immigrant from having to care for a useless animal, but it came at a cost. Each animal was necessary to pull the load. And so an ox or mule or horse that was lost meant more work for the remaining animals, more strain on the supply of food. Some families chose to abandon a few animals, others chose to do all three. In the end, only the strongest immigrants reached Oregon alive. All across the plains, you could see abandoned wagons and the bones of dead animals, and at some sites, you could see both. In fact, there were dozens of locations along the Oregon Trail where wagons had gotten stuck in the mud, and to lighten the load, the immigrants had abandoned their possessions right there in the wagon. And then, when the owners of those wagons moved on, wolves and other predators picked over the goods and left behind nothing but bones. All along the trail, there were signs of struggle, death, and despair, but there was also evidence of life. Here a family had gathered around their wagon and made camp. There a group of travelers had sat around a campfire and shared stories. At the next campsite, a mother rocked her baby in a cradle while the father mended a broken wagon wheel. And as you moved further west, you began to see more signs of life and fewer signs of struggle. And eventually, the mountains loomed ahead, promising shelter, safety, and the end of the journey. So, yeah, while thousands set out on the Oregon Trail that year, not all of them made it to Oregon. And whether they did or didn't, none of them were ever the same after the ordeal. So, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new. And I'll see you next time. How do you move when everything around you is frozen? How do you move when your feet are frozen? The crunch of snow underfoot is a deceptively simple sound. Snow can feel comforting, pristine, like a blanket over the world. It's quiet, it's still. You step into it, a hush falls over everything, but every step is hard. The crunch of snow is really a symphony of sounds, each one saying the same thing. Everything is frozen. The muscles in your legs scream at you to stop. You keep going, they'll seize up, your whole body will freeze. And deep in your bones, something cold and hungry is stirring. Your lungs know the cold air is good for nothing. Every breath stings. You wonder how long it will take for the sun to warm your skin again. How many more days of fighting winds before spring comes? The first sign that you're freezing is tingling in your fingers and toes. It starts small, then expands, all the warmth leaking out of you, becoming part of the silent, frozen world. The next sign is exhaustion. A heaviness settles on your eyelids. Your vision clears. Is it tiredness or is it snow blindness? You don't know. Your eyes hurt when you blink, so you keep them squeezed shut. All motion feels harder than it should. Reaching for a bucket, lifting it to your shoulder, even standing up from a chair. Frozen limbs have a life of their own. They work against you. When you try to stand, one leg wants to stay down. When you reach for your mug, your fingers curl in on themselves. There's no smooth curve to the slope you're sledding down. It's like someone took the world and smashed it into jagged pieces. It takes double effort just to keep moving forward. But staying still isn't an option either. The cold will creep inside you if you let it turn your organs to ice. You have to keep moving until there's no strength left to move. A house like this, what would you hide in the walls of your house? Memories, photographs, trinkets picked up on travels, shells and stones, the evidence of a life well lived. What if your house didn't have walls? The wind doesn't care about windows or doors. It whistles through chinks in the logs, under loose shutters, anywhere a draft can squeeze through. In the high peaks, there are houses built of stone and wood, stacked carefully, almost cathedral-like in their solemnity. But most of the time, homes are carved out of what little earth there is between the rocks. Sometimes there's a roof of wood and stone to keep the worst of the weather out. Sometimes there's nothing above you but the stars. Every night the wind seeks out the weakest places in your shelter, and every morning you find yourself patching up the damage, piling up snow to block the wind, treading down a place to sit, to sleep, to cook. Inside, you huddle by the fire, hoping its warmth will spread through you. Maybe it does. Maybe it only feels like it does. The silence of winter is different than any other season. Summer nights buzz with crickets and frogs. Autumn evenings call with whippoorwills. Spring has birdsong and babbling brooks. Winter has none of this. It has silence, a heavy, enveloping silence. Days like these days get shorter, shadows grow longer. It's easy to lose track of time when there's nothing to mark its passing. Frozen lake, a full moon, a sliver of moon, the hours slip by unnoticed. Time isn't marked by the changing seasons anymore. Now it's measured in meals, in fires, in patches of sky visible between the cave's ceiling and the blanket of snow outside. When you can't see the sky, you forget that the sun moves across it. The sun becomes a number on a thermometer, a concept rather than a feeling. Warmth trickles out of you, day by day, week by week. You have to pile on layer after layer, fur, wool, feathers, whatever will stop the flow. Soon you can't remember what it felt like to be warm. You don't remember what it looked like, just that it was good. You dream of summer and wake up aching. With the need to feel the sun again, the silence is the hardest. It wraps itself around you, presses in like the cold. The silence screams. There are no birds, no wind through leaves, no water running. Only silence. People like us, we say we're survivors, but survival is a verb. We survive every day we live. Most people settle for existing. That's not living. That's waiting for spring. Living means carving out a place in the snow. It means chopping wood and feeding the fire. It means hunting and gathering. Living means building a home in the wilderness, learning to read the signs, tracking animals, finding food, making tools. Living means you never give up hope. It means carrying your history in your bones, in your hands, in the way you hold yourself a little taller, a little stronger against the wind. People like us learn to read the sky. We watch for the first hint of green under winter's gray, the moment the sun climbs a little higher. We watch for returning birds, for melting snow, for crocuses pushing up through the cold ground. We are ready for what winter throws at us because we know the rules. We know the dangers. We know what we must do every day to keep going. We're not afraid of the dark, of storms, of cold. We understand it. We have a fire for it. We bring our stories inside, share them by the light of the hearth. And maybe that's why, even when the world outside seems to be ending, we're still here telling stories, waiting for spring. The world outside is changing as the snow piles up. The world changes. Trees turn into sculptures, sharp and cold. Animals disappear. Their tracks are the only evidence that they ever were here. Scatters of white cover everything, muffling the world. No birds sing in this silence. No breeze stirs. Nothing moves unless it wants to. Winter is a time of scarcity, of careful rationing, of making do. Summer brings abundance. There are berries to gather, fish to catch, game to hunt, roots and tubers to dig up, maple sap to collect. Berries are a rare treat in winter. They're frozen under the snow, locked tight in their icy shells. But inside, their skins burst with color and flavor. They're bright splashes of red and purple, of blue and black jewels scattered across the landscape. Under the snow, the world is sleeping, dormant. It waits for the sun's touch to waken it. Root systems huddle together, sending down tendrils to seek water in the frozen ground. Sap traces channels beneath the frozen bark. Animals dig down into the insulating layers of snow to make their dens. Birds fly away or huddle with their fellows for warmth. Winter's world is spare, stark, stripped bare, but there's beauty in that. It's beautiful the way a sculpture is beautiful, the way a bare branch against a gray sky is beautiful. It's beautiful the way grief can be beautiful, the way loss can be beautiful. It is beautiful the way you are beautiful when you've been tested by fire and come out the other side. The world outside may be frozen, but inside you, life is still beating. You know this because you hear it in the creak of the floorboards, in the crackle of the fire, in the beat of your own heart. You know this because you look around you and see the beauty of a world made still, a world made new. You know this because you are still here. The final morning of the 1840s Oregon Trail. You rise before sunrise, pull on your tattered clothes, and do whatever chores are left. For many, those chores will include caring for sick or dying family members. The strong carried the weak as long as they could, and now you're all too weak. By now, most have abandoned their wagons, which have become more burden than blessing. So you leave what little remains of your shelter behind, grab what little remains of your supplies, and start out again. For the past several days, you've been subsisting on little more than berries and roots. Your shoes are worn to shreds. Some wrap their feet in rags. Others walk barefoot on frozen ground. Blisters have turned to infections. Toes have turned purple. Skin has cracked. Every step burns. There is no break, no rescue wagon, no footrest waiting at camp. You limp, and if you can't, you are left behind. You don't know how many people are still with you. Most of the group is so thin now that they've stopped counting. All you know is that time played tricks on your mind. With hunger, cold, and exhaustion came hallucinations. Some pioneers reported seeing lights that weren't there, houses in the distance, firelight that flickered and vanished. Others swore they saw ghosts, relatives they'd lost earlier on the trail, or figures walking beside them who disappeared when touched. The mind, weakened by suffering, began to dream while still awake. but you have to keep walking. Now, 170 days after leaving Missouri, the terrain suddenly changes. The steep trail dips, the trees thin, and there it is, the Willamette Valley. Lush, green, quiet, real. Some cry, some collapse. Some stare, numb, too tired to feel anything. They have made it. Over the course of the long trek, travelers had walked 1,500 to 2,000 miles. Many were down to their last rations. Food would soon be in short supply. But that didn't mean the dangers of the journey were over. If they were going to make it to the valley, they'd need to watch out for falling rocks and deep holes under the snow. As they struggled to keep moving, hear us how they got through the final stretch of the Oregon Trail and why some never made it. Throughout the journey on the Oregon Trail, each mile seemed harder than the one before. Now, more than ever, it felt like an endless fight against the elements. The travelers followed the Arkansas River north into Colorado territory. Here, heavy rains, melting snows, and freezing nights created muddy, slippery trails, often without warning. Travelers would encounter hidden holes where the ice had melted only to refreeze, creating deadly traps for the weary travelers. Along this treacherous route, death lurked everywhere. In late March, a violent blizzard struck, catching the travelers off guard. Many died in the storm and were found frozen in their wagons, holding the reins in their stiffened hands. The temperature plunged to 30 degrees below zero. Winds howled and snow fell in thick, choking clouds, burying the living and the dead. Those who survived emerged from their shelters to find the world transformed. Everything was covered in white, frozen solid. Houses, animals, corpses, all buried under drifts, sometimes 10 feet high. Now, nearly 5 months into their journey, the party faced another problem: dwindling food supplies. In mid-April, they arrived at Julesburg, a trading post on the South Platte River in present-day Colorado. It was a rare sight for travelers to see other people, especially white people. Julesburg was named for French traveler Jean-Baptiste Charpentier, who established a trading post there in 1826. Over the years, fur traders dominated the area until miners arrived. After gold was discovered nearby in 1859, the town became a supply depot for the miners heading into the Rockies. For the pioneers, it was a welcome source of fresh meat and vegetables. However, not everyone could afford to stop and rest. Some were too far gone to make the trek any further. One pioneer described the grim scene he encountered upon arrival. The first thing we saw was a great pile of stones standing by the riverside, and soon found it was a grave, the remains being to little children who died of starvation. Their poor mother, an emaciated skeleton, was sitting by the fireside telling us their sad story. She told us they had eaten the last of their flour, which had been brought from Missouri, and then subsisted on berries until they died, which was about 4 days. We buried the children and gave the mother a decent supper, she being the first person we had seen for 6 weeks. With their spirits lifted and bellies full, the travelers continued toward the end of their journey. The signs welcoming them to Oregon were subtle at first, but soon grew more frequent. Along the South Platte River in present-day Nebraska, they passed a marker that read Oregon 1845. A few weeks later, they reached Chimney Rock, a towering landmark that marked the halfway point of their trip. From there, the signs of civilization grew more frequent. But as they approached the Great Plains, the travelers knew they had to hurry. Summer was approaching, and the longer they stayed on the plains, the greater their chance of contracting deadly diseases like cholera and dysentery. On April 22nd, 1846, the entire company crossed the 100th meridian, a symbolic boundary that separated the settled lands from the unsettled West. 3 days later, they reached Independence Rock in Wyoming, a massive granite boulder that towered 1,400 feet above the North Platte River. It was here that travelers could get their first glimpse of Rattlesnake Mountain in the distance. Some said the peak resembled a coiled rattlesnake ready to strike. For the weary travelers, it was a symbol of the hardships that lay ahead. By mid-May, most of the travelers had reached the Laramie River in Wyoming, where they needed to decide whether to continue on the Oregon Trail or head south toward California. Many decided to stay on the Oregon Trail and press forward. Others, including the entire immigrant company led by John Gant, chose to turn back. At Fort Bridger, Captain James B. L. Leavitt and his 900-member company made camp. While they rested, Leavitt sent an advance party to scout the road ahead. What they found was so disheartening that Leavitt called the entire company together to decide what to do next. The captain explained that the bridge across the Green River had been washed away and the nearest ferry was 30 miles away. Furthermore, the advance party had found hundreds of graves along the trail. People traveling from Oregon to winter quarters had contracted cholera and died. Given the lack of food, travelers were urged to turn back. But now fear hung over the group like a shroud. Among them was Thomas J. Dreyer, who wrote about the growing tension among the travelers. When the dreadful word cholera was mentioned, you could see fathers clutching their children to their bosoms, brothers throwing their arms around their sisters, and all engaged in the most frantic and hurried prayers to a merciful God. All the young ladies were thrown into hysterics. Our camp was a perfect picture of hell for the space of half an hour. Fearful that they would be trapped between the travelers coming from Oregon and those coming from Fort Bridger, the group decided to push forward. Dreyer continued, "We now commenced our race for life. Everyone to their wagon, all hands to the teams. Hurry up," was the order, and we started forward, the whole company at once. The travelers moved at top speed, reaching Fort Supply, also known as Fort Hall, on May 24th. They were horrified at the condition of the fort. More than 100 bodies lay inside and outside the fort, victims of cholera. The travelers hastily set up camp some distance from the fort and waited 3 days before entering. From there, they followed the Snake River through Idaho toward the Columbia River in Oregon. Soon they began to see signs of civilization. The travelers' nightmare was finally ending. But the reality of the valley wasn't exactly what they'd imagined. On June 6th, the weary travelers arrived at the Dalles, a rocky outcropping overlooking the Columbia River. It was the last obstacle separating them from the Willamette Valley. From here, they could see farms, houses, cattle, the beginnings of towns. But with their strength nearly depleted, they had to wait 2 days before continuing on. On June 8th, the pioneers finally arrived in the Willamette Valley. They poured out of their wagons, unable to contain their joy. Some traveled on horseback, riding as if they would never tire. Others sat on logs or strolled aimlessly, overcome with the peace of the valley. The first night, they celebrated with bonfires and barbecues, the first good meal in months. It was the beginning of a new life. The suffering was over. At least that's what they thought. While most of the travelers made it to the Willamette Valley, others perished along the way. The strongest estimate puts the total number of deaths on the Oregon Trail at 4,000, half of which occurred during the final leg of the journey. For those who survived, the trauma of the journey continued to haunt them. Now that they had made it to Oregon, they were faced with the daunting task of building new lives. But many were too afraid to leave their wagons, spending the night huddled inside as they dreamed of the horrors of the trail. Even years later, former travelers would experience nightmares and flashbacks to their time on the Oregon Trail. But they had survived the toughest journey of their lives. When you hear the word pioneer, what comes to mind? A rough and tumble frontiersman ready to tame the wild frontier with his trusty rifle and his wits. Or perhaps a woman in a bonnet and an apron struggling to keep her family alive on the unforgiving prairie. What if I told you that both images are true? Pioneers were both strong men and women. They were ordinary people who did extraordinary things. And if you think you couldn't survive the journey west, just wait until you hear how much grit and determination it took for these pioneers to survive after they arrived in Oregon. But it had taken everything they had: a rifle, rebuilding, and the strength quiet after the journey. After months of relentless walking, dust, and worry, you finally see the green fields of Oregon stretching out before you. Your heart might race. Relief washes over your body like cool water. You've made it. The journey is over. But arrival wasn't a grand celebration. It was quiet. All the noise and chaos of the journey had taken its toll. When they finally reached their destination, most groups were too tired to do anything but collapse, stepping off the trail. The moment you stepped off the trail, you felt the earth beneath your feet change. No more compacted dirt road. No more constant dust clouding your eyes. The grass was soft, the air smelled sweet. But your body, exhausted, your muscles trembled. Your feet ached so badly, even the soft ground hurt. The journey was done. Your work had only just begun. Rebuilding from scratch, most pioneers planned to settle. They brought supplies, seeds, tools, and livestock to begin a new life. But the supplies were meager and most of their tools were worn out. The trip west had been hard on equipment and replacement parts were scarce. Add to that the time needed to set up camp and the energy needed to hunt or forage food, and you have a group of exhausted, hungry settlers ready to fall into bed and hope for the best. There was no time to rest, however. If they didn't plant soon, they wouldn't have anything to harvest before winter. So while some stayed behind to care for the sick and injured, the rest of the party got to work. With no stores nearby, each family had to fend for itself. Foraging was a good option at first, but it takes time to find edible plants. So most people subsisted on what they could hunt and fish. Some pioneers fared well in this arrangement, especially those who had brought guns and dogs. Others weren't so lucky. Without adequate hunting supplies, some families struggled to put meat in front of their children. In fact, there were instances where pioneers resorted to eating their pet dogs. Shelter was another issue. Tents were fine in good weather, but Oregon's weather can be unpredictable. Heavy rains drenched the settlers, and high winds tore their flimsy shelters to shreds. It was difficult to pitch a tent on uneven ground, and sometimes impossible to get a fire started in wet conditions. Luckily, most pioneers knew how to live in nature. They used natural materials to build sturdy lean-tos, and some built small cabins. Any extra materials were saved for future construction. In the meantime, families huddled around fires for warmth and safety. The darkness was filled with the crackle of flames and the low murmur of conversation. These evenings were a time for sharing stories and catching up on news from the trail. Life on the frontier was dangerous and lonely, but these evening gatherings provided a sense of community and normalcy. Danger lurked everywhere. Unfortunately, not everyone wanted to share in this pioneer spirit. Some settlers found themselves targeted by thieves who were looking to profit from the hardships of others. To protect their food and other supplies, pioneers created community watch groups. Every able-bodied person took a turn keeping watch. The danger didn't come only from human predators, though. Wild animals roamed the area and were hungry for human food. Bears, mountain lions, wolves, and smaller animals like raccoons and skunks raided camps regularly. Pioneers were forced to take extreme measures to keep their food safe. One method was to string up meat and other goods from trees in an effort to keep them out of the reach of hungry critters. Other settlers cooked their meals over open fires and then buried the leftovers in the ground to keep them fresh. While this method kept the animals away, it often resulted in spoiled food from time to time. Nothing could be done about it. Settlers were forced to use every last bit of their precious resources wisely, and that meant using every bit of food available to them. There was no such thing as leftovers on the frontier. If the dangers of life on the frontier weren't enough, many settlers had to contend with one more threat: hostile tribes. The Native Americans who lived in the region had been there for centuries before the first European settlers arrived. They had a deep knowledge of the land and its resources and were skilled hunters and gatherers. However, the two cultures had very different ways of living. And as the number of settlers grew, so did the tension between the two groups. Many times treaties were broken and battles were fought. But there were also times when the two cultures came together and shared their knowledge and resources. In these instances, settlers learned how to live off the land and survive in the wilderness. This was a valuable skill that helped them endure the hardships of frontier life. New life on the Oregon Trail. Although life on the Oregon Trail was filled with danger, disease, and death, there were still reasons to celebrate. Families arriving safely at their destinations, successful hunts, the birth of a child. These were all occasions for rejoicing. Birth on the Oregon Trail was a particularly joyous event. The arrival of a new baby meant the continuation of the family's bloodline and the hope of a better future. Midwives were in charge of delivering babies, and they played an important role in pioneer life. They provided not only medical assistance, but also emotional support to new mothers. The birth of a child was a major event in a pioneer's life, and it was celebrated with a ceremony. The child was given a name, and the community gathered to welcome the newest member. The Oregon Trail was a tough place to be born, and many children died young. Those who did survive were cherished members of their families and communities. The birth of a child was a time for celebration and hope for a better future. Death on the trail. Unfortunately, death was also a part of life on the Oregon Trail. Most pioneers traveled with family and friends. They relied on each other for help and comfort along the way. When someone died, the group would stop and hold a funeral. The body would be buried with a simple ceremony, and a headstone would be made if possible. The death of a loved one on the Oregon Trail was a traumatic event. It was not only emotionally difficult for the surviving family members, but also physically taxing. Funerals and burials required a lot of work and time, which took away from the limited amount of daylight hours. Additionally, the stress of losing someone on the trail could cause other members of the group to become ill. The pioneers who traveled the Oregon Trail were a hardy bunch. They were willing to endure great hardship and even death itself in order to make a better life for themselves and their families. They were pioneers because they were willing to explore new lands and blaze a trail for others to follow. They were pioneers because they were searching for a better life. The Oregon Trail is a reminder of the courage and determination of the pioneers who traveled it. It is also a reminder of the price they paid in order to make a better life for themselves and their families. The strange quiet. After months on the trail, there was little to break the silence except for the wind through the tall grasses and the distant call of a lonely bird. The isolation was palpable, broken only by the crackling of a campfire and the murmur of voices. There was no distant rumble of wagon wheels, no shouts or laughter echoing through the valleys. Just the unsettling quiet of an empty wilderness. The absence of sound was deafening. It was a stark contrast to the cacophony of the trail, the creaking of wagons, the braying of animals, the shouts of travelers. Here, in the heart of the untamed wilderness, there was only silence. It was a silence that seemed to swallow all sound, a silence that was both eerie and unsettling. The solitude was almost tangible, pressing in from all sides, making it hard to breathe. The vastness of the prairie stretched out in all directions, a seemingly endless sea of grass and sky. And in the middle of it all, a small group of pioneers stood on the cusp of a new life, their journey over, their spirits unbroken. This is an American story about a journey across an unsettled continent and the forging of a new nation. It's a tale of courage and hardship, of opportunity and loss, of triumph and tragedy. It's a story that begins with a dream and ends with a nation. But what if you could experience this epic saga for yourself? What if you could feel the thrill of the frontier, the danger of the journey, the promise of a new life? Well, now you can. Welcome to our channel where today we're going to do something different. Instead of telling a story, we're going to let you live one. And here's how it works. As the story unfolds, you will occasionally see a prompt like this. This one means it's time to make a choice. All you have to do is click on one of the highlighted options and you will be taken to a scene where you can experience the story in all its richness. You can explore your surroundings, talk to the characters, make decisions that affect the outcome. It's up to you. Just remember, every choice you make will bring you closer to the heart of the action. So, are you ready to begin your own American story? Let's get started. The year is 1850 and you are a young pioneer setting out for Oregon with your family and a wagon train of settlers. Your destination, the Willamette Valley, a lush expanse of rolling hills and fertile fields that beckons you with the promise of a new life, but the journey is fraught with peril. The Oregon Trail, a rugged path stretching over 2,000 miles from Missouri to Oregon, is littered with the bones of those who attempted the journey before, and many won't make it. After weeks on the road, your wagon train has made camp for the night. The air is filled with the sounds of crickets and the distant howl of wolves. As you sit around the campfire with your family, you hear the sound of approaching footsteps. A lone figure emerges from the darkness, his face obscured by the shadow of his hat. "Good evening, folks," he says in a gruff voice. "Mind if I join your fire? I'm Captain Clayton, retired Army Scout. I've seen better days." He gestures to his worn and tattered clothes and missing an arm. "I've been tracking a group of mountain men who stole some supplies from me. They're headed your way and they mean trouble. What do you do?" Warn the other settlers immediately. B. Try to reason with the captain. C. Sneak away while everyone's distracted. Choose wisely, pioneer, because your decision will shape the fate of the settlement. Click on one of the highlighted options to decide. You emerge from the cave with your provisions, heart pounding. In the distance, you hear the telltale sound of a wagon wheel braking. It's them. They're here. The others are gonna find the supplies soon. You need to hide. Where do you go? Climb the nearest tree. B. Keep running deeper into the forest. C. Make a break for the river and hide in the water. Choose quickly. Your life may depend on it. The year is 1848, and you are a young woman named Elizabeth. The land you call home has changed hands more times than you can count. First, it was the Native Americans, then the Spanish, then the Mexicans, and now Americans are pouring into Texas. Many of them come from your state. Others have traveled across Europe to start a new life in America. With so many different kinds of people arriving every day, there's a lot to learn about those around you. Just yesterday, you were introduced to Eliza. She wore a fancy dress and spoke with an accent that sounded like music. When she learned you were from New York, she told you stories of the ballets she danced in Paris and the artists who had painted her portrait. Then there's Thomas. He wears simple homespun clothes and speaks in slow, deliberate sentences. He told you about how he fought in the War of 1812 and how he carved his initials into the Liberty Bell. There are so many stories to uncover. Who will you spend time with tonight at the social gathering in town? Stay close to your family and only speak with people you know. D. Dance with Eliza and flirt with the dashing French-Canadian traveler. C. Seek out Thomas and ask him about the War of 1812. What would you like to do? Choose wisely, Elizabeth, because your choice will shape your destiny in Texas. Click on one of the highlighted options to decide. Now that you've arrived in Oregon territory, it's time to set down roots. The fertile Willamette Valley stretches before you, promising a bounty of crops and a life of plenty. But the soil, though fertile, needed tending and careful planting. You learned new skills quickly: farming, hunting, building fences. There was no relief from hard work, just a shift in the kind of labor. Days turned into weeks, and the satisfaction of a growing harvest was tempered by the isolation. Letters from back east were rare or non-existent. You wondered if it was all worth it, but you didn't say that aloud. One crisp autumn afternoon, you're raking leaves when Sarah, a neighbor, knocks on your door. "Would you like to come over tomorrow and help me can tomatoes?" she asks. Sure, you say, always happy for company. That sounds great. The next day, you arrive at Sarah's house with your basket of tomatoes. She has already got a fire going in her brick oven and a pot of tomatoes simmering on the stove. We'll have enough preserves to last us all winter, she says with a satisfied smile. It's good to be prepared. My husband, John, tells me the winters here can get pretty harsh. As the sun begins to set, you and Sarah finish up the last of the cannon and you head home. The air is cool against your skin and the sound of crickets fills the air. Life on the frontier was tough, but there was a certain beauty in it too. The vast open spaces, the endless fields of grain, the camaraderie of the settlers coming together to build a new life. And as you look up at the stars that glittered in the night sky, you knew you were part of something special. Some pioneers were physically damaged, injuries from accidents on the trail, diseases that never fully left. Others carried deep emotional scars, dreams of a new life clashed with the harsh reality. You weren't sure you believed in manifest destiny anymore. What did you do? Wrote a letter back east explaining everything. B. Threw yourself into the work of building a community. C. Withdrew from the other settlers, focusing only on your own survival. Choose carefully, pioneer, because your decision will affect not only you, but the entire community. Click on one of the highlighted options to decide. Years have passed since the wagon trains first rumbled into Oregon. The settlement has grown into a bustling town, and you've played an active role in its development. Churches and schools have been built, and children play together, discovering the wilderness as a new kind of home. You watch the youngsters play and think about how far you've come. There's Thomas, whose father was killed in an accident on the trail. He still carries the guilt of surviving while his dad died. And then there's Sarah, who lost her mother during childbirth. Her father, a stern man who rarely spoke of emotions, took her and her siblings to live with relatives. Through it all, you've provided a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. You've helped organize fundraisers for families struck by tragedy and have offered words of comfort and encouragement. In the midst of this growth, you've also witnessed the darker side of progress. The very forces that have brought settlers to this land have also displaced the Native Americans who once thrived here. Entire villages have been wiped off the map, their inhabitants either forced to relocate or worse. The once pristine landscape is now scarred with the marks of civilization, forests leveled, streams dammed. Despite the challenges and the heartache, you know you're part of something bigger than yourself. You're helping to build a new nation. The year is 1869, and you are standing on the banks of the recently completed Transcontinental Railroad in Promontory Summit, Utah. Behind you stretch the rails that have connected the eastern United States to the Pacific. Before you lies a continent transformed. The railroad has cut travel time from months to weeks, opening the West to a new wave of settlers and fortune seekers. As you watch the steam engine pull away, you realize the journey isn't over. It's just beginning. The vastness of the unsettled West beckons with the promise of adventure, opportunity, and untold challenges. Where will you go now? To the newly opened gold mines of Colorado. B. To the fertile farmlands of the Willamette Valley. C. To the booming metropolis of San Francisco. Choose your destination, pioneer, because your journey is far from over. Click on one of the highlighted options to decide. They say only the good die young, but out here on the frontier, it doesn't seem to matter how old you are. Death waits for none. He takes the young, the old, the strong, and the weak. He doesn't care who you are or what you've done. Out here, death is a daily visitor, a constant companion. We've seen him take children, strong men, and even the most seasoned frontiersmen. The trail has a way of humbling you, reminding you that no matter who you are, you're just a blip in the grand scheme of things. So when we talk about dying on the Oregon Trail, we're not just talking about one person. We're talking about all the folks who walked this trail, the hopes, dreams, and lives they carried with them. It's a story that's been repeated countless times over, a story of loss and remembrance. You awaken with the sun, your head pounding like a drum against the sky. The fire's long dead, leaving only embers to glow faintly in the darkness. Your surroundings are a blur, the campfire smoke still stinging your eyes. What happened last night? The events of yesterday swim before your eyes. The fever hit hard, stealing your energy and clouding your mind. You remember the chills, the sweats, the shakes, and then the blessed sleep that finally took the edge off. But now you're alone. Where are the others? Panic rises like bile in your throat. You call out, your voice hoarse and cracking, but only silence answers you. You stumble out of camp, each step a torment to your aching head. The vast prairie stretches before you, empty and mocking. A crow calls overhead, its caw echoing your despair. The trail, the wagon, the oxen, all gone. You're alone in a sea of grass with nothing but the mocking sun for company. Hunger gnaws at your belly, thirst parches your throat. But it's the loneliness that cuts deepest, a wound that won't stop bleeding. You're just a speck in this endless wilderness, utterly alone. No sound, no sign of life, just the whispering grass and the wind playing its mournful tune. Where are they? Are they coming back? Will anyone find you? Or are you truly lost, abandoned in this unforgiving land? You pack your meager belongings, the few things you could carry with you when you left the trail. Days ago, it feels like a lifetime ago, a different world. Back then, you were part of a wagon train, community bound for the same destination, sharing the hardships and hopes of the journey. There was safety in numbers, in the camaraderie around the campfire, in the familiar routines of trail life. You helped mend a broken wagon wheel, shared stories under a sky full of stars, mended a sick child's fevered brow. There were songs, there was laughter, there was life. And then the fever came, stealing your loved ones, one by one, until there were just you and the ghosts of the wagon train. You don't remember burying them, don't remember the prayers or the goodbyes. The fever stole that too. Now you walk alone, your companions only the dust devils dancing in the heat haze and the tumbleweeds rolling across your path. Every mile marker is a reminder of what you've lost, every sunset a requiem for the life you once had. The trail is long and lonely, and you wonder if you have the strength to finish it. The end seems like a distant star, cold and unreachable. But you have to keep going. There's no turning back. You don't know what lies ahead, but you do know that staying here won't bring back what's been lost. So you walk, driven by grief, sustained by the hope that somehow, someday the pain will ease. You wander, a shadow of your former self, through the remnants of a bustling city. Shattered windows gape like vacant eyes staring sightlessly into the dusty street. Crumbling buildings huddle together as if seeking solace in their shared decay. The air is thick with the ghosts of laughter, the phantom echo of a blacksmith's hammer, the spectral hum of a barber's shave. You see a tattered book lying on a broken chair, its pages fluttering in the breeze like a wounded bird. As you reach for it, a faded photograph slips out, two smiling children holding a tattered teddy bear. On the back, a name, a date, a memory. You trace the inscription with your finger, feeling the weight of lives lived, dreams dreamt, stories untold. You walk on, the city's silent story etched forever in your heart. Days turn into weeks, and the landscape remains unchanged, a flat, featureless expanse that stretches to the horizon. The sun beats down relentlessly, turning the world into a shimmering haze. The wagon wheels, once a source of comfort and familiarity, now feel like shackles binding you to a past you can't escape. Each creak and groan is a lament for the journey's end, for the lives that were and the dreams that died on this godforsaken trail. You sit on a fallen log, the rough bark digging into your clothes, your bones aching with fatigue. You look up at the sky, a vast, uncaring blue, and wonder why. Why are you doing this? What drove you to leave everything behind, to brave the hardships, the loneliness, the ever-present fear? Was it the promise of a better life, the lure of adventure, or something else? Some inner turmoil that drove you from the familiar to the unknown? You don't have an answer. All you know is the road beneath your feet, the one that stretches endlessly before you, beckoning you forward into the heart of the wilderness. You reach for the worn leather strap, your fingers tightening around the smooth wood handle of the shovel. With each swing, the loose soil gives way, revealing the hard conclave beneath. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, a mantra of dirt and sweat and bone-deep exhaustion. As the hole deepens, so does your weariness, mirroring the physical toll it takes. Each movement is a battle against fatigue, a war of attrition between your will and the relentless demand of the trail. The sun climbs higher, the air grows thick and heavy. Your muscles burn with a lactic fire, your throat parched and raw. But you don't stop, not until the final shovel full, not until the grave is full. When you finally lower the shovel, it's not with a sigh of relief, but with the dull thud of resignation. The weight of what you've just done settles upon you, a burden heavier than any load you've carried on the trail. The solitude of the prairie wraps around you, amplifying the silence. There's no sound to break the quiet, no comforting breeze, no bird song, not even the whisper whined through the grass. Just the oppressive quiet of a world holding its breath, the vastness of the sky above, and the endless flatness of the land around you seem to close in, pressing down on you with their immensity. You're a small, insignificant thing in the face of this wild, indifferent nature. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of burnt umber and deepest violet, you build a small fire. The flames rise listlessly, mirroring your own flickering hope. The night air grows cold, seeping into your bones and wrapping itself around you like a shroud. The shadows stretch and twist, taking on shapes of their own. In the darkness, the loneliness is a tangible thing, pressing in on you, suffocating you. The crackling of the fire is the only sound, a counterpoint to the silence of the prairie. You huddle by the fire, pulling your ragged blanket tighter around you, seeking warmth and comfort in its threadbare embrace. The night is filled with whispers and rustlings. The wind plays tricks on your ears, and every snap of a twig sends a jolt of fear through you. Sleep, when it comes, is fitful and haunted by nightmares of the trail, of faces lost and trails gone. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it's over. The light of dawn creeps over the horizon, chasing away the shadows and revealing the stark reality of your situation. You're alone, injured, hungry, lost, and the trail, the only path to the life you once knew, is gone. But something inside you, some primal instinct, a stubborn refusal to be defeated, compels you to get up, to shake off the remnants of sleep, and face another day on the Oregon Trail. The sun climbs higher, casting long shadows that stretch and distort your weary form. You push on, driven by an instinct to survive, to keep moving, to keep hoping that somewhere, somehow, there is a way out of this unending maze of misery. The wagon, once a symbol of safety and routine, now looms over you like a monument to your misfortune, a constant reminder of what you've lost. Its shattered remains are a mirror to your own fragmented spirit, broken and scattered along the desolate trail. The endless fields seem to mock you, their monotonous expanse stretching out like a never-ending punishment. The sky, once a source of hope and connection, now feels like a lid on a closed coffin, trapping you in a world without end or escape. And then, just as you think you might collapse from exhaustion, hunger, and despair, you see it, a solitary figure silhouetted against the horizon. Hope, fragile as a butterfly's wing, flutters in your chest. Is it a fellow traveler? A rescuer? Someone? Anyone? You don't know. But the possibility is enough to make you stumble forward, to lift your head a little higher, to make one more step along the Oregon Trail. Good evening. As night settles over the land and crickets chirp their nightly tunes, it's easy to relax by the firelight and reflect. And that's exactly what I'm doing tonight. I'm reflecting on the Oregon Trail. Now, when most folks think of the Oregon Trail, they probably picture a covered wagon bumping along a dusty path, maybe an oxen pulling it, a family of pioneers waving from the top. They might recall the mountain men with their coon skin caps and rifles slung across their backs. But me, I'm thinking about something different. I'm thinking about the dust. Yeah, the dust. There's a lot of history in this dust. In fact, there's the history of thousands of people in this dust. See, the Oregon Trail was more than just miles traveled or interesting landmarks passed. It was a test of endurance, hope, and the quiet strength within. Every footprint left in the dirt tells a tale of grit and determination. Every heart that beat through hardship echoes a song of survival. Tonight, as you lie still and listen, try to hear the whispers of those who walked before us. Can you hear them? Good. Listen closer. Now you're hearing the steady crunch of wagon wheels on hard-packed earth, the low moans of oxen straining to pull covered wagons laden with dreams. Do you hear that rhythmic sway in the air? That's the pulse of life along the trail. Picture, if you will, thousands of footsteps kicking up fine dust, each step a silent prayer for safe passage. Each footprint a testament to the hopes and fears that drove these pioneers west. Over 200 years ago, the Oregon Trail wasn't just a path, it was a lifeline to a new life. A new life that was sometimes fraught with peril, but the people kept coming. The Oregon Trail started in Missouri, winding its way over 2,000 miles through uncharted wilderness to the Willamette Valley in Oregon. For many Americans east of the Mississippi, this trail represented a chance at a better life, an opportunity to own land and build a future that was unshackled by the crowded cities and strict laws of the East Coast. But let's pause for a moment. Close your eyes. Imagine yourself as one of the pioneers standing on the banks of the Missouri River, ready to set off on this great journey. You've bid farewell to your old life. Now your wagon is packed, your oxen are ready, and you're about to step into a world of uncertainty. As you take that first step onto the trail, you join a growing line of wagons. Each carries its own story, its own hopes and fears. You hear the murmur of conversation, the laughter of children, the lowing of cattle. The trail comes alive with activity as families prepare for the long journey ahead. Your days are filled with the monotonous rhythm of travel. The creak of wagon wheels, the swish of the whip, and the steady plodding of oxen. The landscape around you shifts from rolling plains to rugged mountains. You camp beside rivers, sharing stories and songs with fellow travelers around a crackling fire. The stars above seem especially bright, offering silent companionship in the vast darkness. But the trail is not without its challenges. Muddy stretches test the strength of both man and beast. Rocky terrain makes each mile a battle against the elements. When sickness strikes, fear and despair can be as heavy a burden as any pack animal. And then there's the loneliness. Some nights the silence is so profound that it feels like the very soul of the wilderness is listening to your every word. In moments like these, the vastness of the trail, both physically and metaphorically, can be overwhelming. Here's the thing, the Oregon Trail wasn't just a road, it was a lifeline to a new life. For many, it was a gamble, a roll of the dice on a new frontier. But they were willing to bet everything on the promise of a better tomorrow. These pioneers were farmers, traders, adventurers, all seeking their piece of the American dream. But they weren't just running away from the hardships of their past. They were also running towards something. They were running towards the untamed beauty of the Oregon Territory, a place where the mountains touched the sky and the rivers flowed with promise. They were running towards a chance at land ownership, a chance to build a life on their own terms. The lure of the Northwest was like a beacon, drawing them ever westward. I want you to remember that the Oregon Trail was a human endeavor. It was built, traveled, and survived by real people with hopes, dreams, and fears just like you and me. Their story isn't just a chapter in a history book. It's a part of the very fabric that makes us who we are today. Each morning when you rise, consider the countless footsteps that have walked this land before you. Each step they took was a decision to keep going, to endure one more day on the trail. And that takes a certain kind of strength, a strength that doesn't need a trophy or a crown, but finds power in the quiet act of simply moving forward. So, as you journey through your own trails in life, big and small, remember the pioneers. Remember their grit, their determination, and their unwavering belief in the promise of a new dawn. Let their legacy inspire you to keep moving forward, no matter how tough the terrain or how heavy the load. And when the going gets tough, as it sometimes will, find your strength, not in avoiding the challenge, but in facing it head-on with a pioneer spirit. After all, life, much like the Oregon Trail, is a journey best traveled one step at a time. As the night deepens and the fire crackles, let's talk about what really made the pioneers keep going. Sure, they had their sights set on the lands of the Oregon Territory, dreaming of building a new life out west. But it wasn't just that dream that kept them moving. It was the countless acts of kindness and support they shared along the way. Picture this. You're on the trail and your wagon breaks down. Your supplies are dwindling and you're starting to lose hope. Then out of the blue, a fellow traveler stops by, not out of obligation or pity, but simply because it's the right thing to do. They lend a hand, share some supplies, and offer words of encouragement. These acts of kindness weren't just about helping a neighbor. They were about building a community. In the face of adversity, the pioneers knew they were stronger together. They helped each other repair broken wagons, care for the sick, and navigate the unfamiliar terrain. In the evenings, around the campfire, they shared stories, songs, and recipes, creating bonds that transcended their differences. They celebrated each other's joys and offered comfort during times of sorrow. This sense of unity gave them the strength to press on, knowing that they weren't alone in their struggle. Think about that for a moment. In a world where rugged individualism is often celebrated, the pioneers understood the power of coming together. They knew that true strength came not from one person's solitary efforts, but from the collective spirit of a community bound together by shared purpose and unwavering support. Their spirit lives on in the countless ways people across our nation come together in the face of adversity. From volunteers helping those affected by disasters to neighbors organizing to make their communities better. The pioneering spirit of helping others wasn't just about surviving the journey. It was about thriving on it. Imagine reaching a particularly challenging stretch of the trail. The terrain is rough, the weather is unpredictable, and the days seem endless. You're exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and you begin to question whether it's worth pressing on. That's when you spot a group of pioneers ahead. They're working together, helping each other navigate the difficult terrain. Their wagons are sturdy and well-maintained, and there's a sense of camaraderie among them. As you draw closer, you overhear their laughter and conversation. They're sharing stories, jokes, and even singing songs. They seem energized and hopeful, their spirits undimmed by the challenges around them. You realize that being part of a community like this could make all the difference. With their help, you could overcome the obstacles ahead. You could learn from their experiences, drawing on their collective wisdom and resilience. By joining them, you could tap into a well of shared strength that would carry you forward. Being part of such a community wouldn't just make the journey easier, it would transform it. It would turn a trek fraught with individual struggles into a shared adventure filled with collaboration, learning, and mutual support. It was this spirit of community that allowed the pioneers to thrive on the Oregon Trail, turning a perilous journey into a pathway to a new life. The pioneers pressed on, not just because they dreamed of a better future, but because they faced their present challenges together. Their journey reminds us that in the face of adversity, unity is not just a source of strength, but the very essence of thriving. In the end, the Oregon Trail was about more than just physical endurance. It was a testament to the human spirit's capacity for hope, resilience, and growth. It was a journey marked by the dust of countless footsteps, each carrying the weight of dreams, fears, and the indomitable will to keep moving forward. It was a journey that continues to echo through time, reminding us that the strength to move forward can often be found in the shared stories, struggles, and triumphs that bind us together. The wind howled like a hungry bull, whipping snow into frenzied dances across the barren landscape. Each gust seemed to carry with it the chilling whisper of despair. As the sky continued its endless weave, a heavy blanket of snow muffled the sounds of the world, burying everything in its icy embrace. The biting cold seeped into the very bones of those who dared to venture out, a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of the elements. Amidst this desolate scene, a mother clutched her children close, seeking solace in their innocent warmth. Their small hands tightly clasped around hers, they huddled together for comfort, drawing strength from their shared love. With resolute eyes, she shielded them from the worst of the storm, determined to protect their fragile innocence from the harsh realities of their dire situation. Her heart pounded in her chest, echoing the relentless rhythm of the wind as she fought back tears, knowing that she had to stay strong for their sake. The survival of her children depended on it. In the face of such adversity, their bond became an unbreakable force, a testament to the enduring power of maternal love in the darkest of times. Their story is one of many that unfolded during the terrible trek west, when thousands of hopeful souls embarked on a perilous journey across the Great Plains in the mid-19th century. The lure of new beginnings in the unsettled lands of the American West drew these pioneers out of their homes and onto the rugged Oregon Trail. They traveled in wagon trains, their covered wagons creaking under the weight of their dreams and their hardships. Each mile they covered brought them closer to their destinies, but also exposed them to the brutal whims of fate. As the weeks turned into months, the trail tested their resilience, forcing them to confront challenges that threatened to break their spirits. But even in the face of death, despair, and hunger, the human spirit shone. Families who supported each other through the toughest of times, strangers who shared what little they had, children who played to keep from crying. Yes, it was a story of humanity at its most raw and its best, all in the pursuit of a dream that dared to defy the harshest of realities. But there were also stories that chilled the soul. People who lost everything and everyone and were left with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the memories of their loved ones. Others who resorted to unimaginable acts out of desperation, driven by the gnawing pangs of hunger or the relentless pursuit of a better life. The Oregon Trail was a crucible that forged their spirits and a canvas that painted their hopes and fears across the vast expanse of the Great Plains. The trail demanded more than most could give, testing their limits and forcing them to make impossible choices. Imagine, if you will, a young pioneer girl named Eliza. She stood on the precipice of adulthood, her youthful innocence giving way to the harsh realities of their nomadic existence. At the tender age of 14, she found herself not only responsible for her younger siblings, but also tasked with the daunting duty of delivering messages between the wagon trains. Her small frame bore the weight of responsibility that would have crushed an adult, yet she persevered. Through the scorching heat of summer and the freezing grip of winter, Eliza's voice rang out across the plains, carrying with it the hopes, fears, and commands that kept the wagon train moving forward. Her journey was one of bravery, resilience, and a testament to the strength that blossomed in the hearts of those who dared to dream of a better life on the untamed frontier. Her story intertwined with that of Samuel, a seasoned trapper whose weathered face was a roadmap of his adventures and ordeals on the trail. He had roamed these very plains for years, his knowledge of the land becoming a lifeline for those seeking to tame it. When the wagon trains faced hardship, Samuel was there to guide them, his wisdom bridging the gap between the comforts of civilization and the unforgiving wilderness. His tales of survival and his ability to read the language of the plains made him a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. Samuel became a father figure to many, including Eliza, recognizing in her a kindred spirit, a young soul navigating the complexities of a world that seemed determined to test their mettle. Together, they form an unlikely duo, a beacon of hope amidst the trials and tribulations that plagued the pioneers on their arduous journey westward. Then there was Jacob, a man whose gruff exterior hid a heart as vast as the prairie itself. A former hatter, he had witnessed the dark side of humanity and the toll it took on the human psyche. Haunted by his past, he sought solace in the solitude of the trail, finding purpose in guiding the wagon trains to safety. His knowledge of herbal remedies and his uncanny ability to connect with the natural world around them became a source of healing and sustenance for the weary travelers. Beneath his rough exterior beat a soul that refused to surrender to despair, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity. The trio, Eliza, Samuel, and Jacob, navigated the treacherous terrain of the Oregon Trail, facing down starvation, disease, and the constant threat of violence from both the elements and the indigenous tribes that called these lands home. Their journey was fraught with peril, testing not only their physical endurance, but also the depths of their compassion and the strength of their bonds. Despite the odds stacked against them, they pressed on, driven by the collective dream of reaching Oregon's Willamette Valley. Through it all, their unique bond remained a constant, a shining beacon in the darkness, offering solace and strength when the trail seemed determined to break their spirits. But the path to the Promised Land was paved with more than just dirt and despair. It was a road that led to personal growth, self-discovery, and the forging of unbreakable friendships. Amidst the backdrop of a relentless journey, these characters found themselves evolving, their perspectives shifting as they confronted the harsh realities of frontier life head-on. Eliza, with her youthful spirit, learned the hard way about responsibility, courage, and the unwavering strength of the human will. Samuel, the grizzled trapper, confronted his own inner demons, finding redemption in guiding others and sharing his hard-earned wisdom. Jacob, the haunted hatter, discovered a sense of belonging and purpose in the camaraderie of the trail, slowly healing the wounds of his past. Their individual journeys intertwined, creating a tapestry of resilience, growth, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Onward they pressed, their steps echoing the rhythm of hope and despair that defined the Oregon Trail. Along the way, they encountered a cast of characters, each as weathered and worn by the trail as the next. There was Martha, a spirited widow whose quiet strength belied a fierce determination to forge a new life for herself and her children. Thomas, a former blacksmith whose calloused hands now guided the oxen with a practiced ease, carrying with him the silent grief of lost love. And then there was William, a brash young man eager to prove himself, masking his fear of the unknown with bravado and charm. Each of these individuals brought with them the baggage of their past and the dreams of their future, making the long and lonely journey slightly less daunting. They shared stories around the flickering campfire, swapping tales of adventure, loss, and the unwavering hope that spurred them forward. In their shared humanity, they found moments of respite, forging bonds that transcended the hardships that lay ahead. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the prairie, they huddled together for warmth and comfort, drawing strength from the flickering flames and the stories they wove. For on this trail, it wasn't just the miles that separated them from their dreams, but also the darkness that threatened to consume their spirits. Yet they persevered, their unity a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dared to dream beyond the confines of their time. Together they tackled each challenge that the trail threw at them, drawing upon the collective wisdom, strength, and resilience of their ragtag community. But the Oregon Trail was a merciless mistress, demanding a heavy toll in exchange for every mile conquered. Disease stalked their campfires, stealing loved ones and leaving behind a trail of grief. Starvation loomed at every bend, testing their resolve and forcing them to make heart-wrenching decisions. and the constant threat of conflict with indigenous tribes hung over them like a storm cloud, ready to burst at the slightest provocation. Throughout it all, their unity held firm, a shining beacon amidst the encroaching darkness. They mourned their losses, shared their fears, and stood together in the face of danger, their bonds deepening with each passing trial. And yet, even in the darkest hours, the spirit of hope flickered on, urging them onward towards the promise of a new life in Oregon. For some, the Oregon Trail was a path to redemption, a chance to escape the shadows of their past and forge a new identity in the crucible of the frontier. For others, it was a desperate gamble, a last-ditch effort to secure a better future for their families. And for many, it was a journey into the unknown, a leap of faith into the vast expanse of the American wilderness. Now it's time to hear from you. How far would you go for a dream? Share your thoughts. And as you do, let's remember those who dared to follow the winding path of the Oregon Trail. Their stories, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity in the face of extraordinary challenges. And now, with the echoes of their journeys still ringing in our ears, it's time for us to embark on our own paths. Where will your journey take you today? And what dreams will you dare to chase? The world is yours to explore. So go forth, dear viewer, and may your adventures be filled with wonder, resilience, and the unwavering belief in the power of your own story. Hey there! And now we're going to do something different for a few minutes. We're going to practice a body scan meditation. A body scan? Really? It's called body scan meditation, but it's more of an exercise. I like to do this at the end of a longer meditation because it is a little jarring to go from a focused meditation straight into a body scan. But if that's all we have today, then so be it, okay? This exercise takes about 10 minutes, and it's good to release tension in your body. It is also good to practice presence and awareness of what is happening in your body at any given moment. So just get comfortable and let's get started. Okay, so you can keep your eyes open or you can close them. For me, I like to keep my eyes open and stare at a candle flame or something like that just to keep me aware of my surroundings. But you do whatever feels best for you. Now what I want you to do is I want you to bring your awareness to the weight of your body. You are heavy. You are grounded. You are rooted to this earth. You are held by the earth, and the earth is holding you right now. If you were to fall, if you were to collapse, the ground would catch you. You wouldn't fall forever. You'd come back to earth. You'd come back to the earth plane. You'd come back to the present moment. Now, as your breathing slows, let the weight of the journey lift from your shoulders. Feel the quiet comfort of the night wrapping around you. Now you are safe. You made it. You arrived. The dust has settled. The oxen are resting. The trail is silent and you are safe. You made it. You arrived. Let the silence of the night settle over you like a blanket. It's warm. It's comforting. It's inviting you to rest. It's inviting you to relax. And now you are safe. You may not always feel safe. You may not always feel comfortable with who or what surrounds you. But here in this moment, here on this particular stretch of trail, under these particular stars with the fire crackling nearby, you are safe. And with that safety comes the opportunity to relax, to soften your posture, to slow your breath, to allow the muscles of your body to begin to loosen and to relax. Because when you're traveling the trail, when you're making your way through the world, you hold yourself in a certain way. You brace yourself for what might happen next, and that tension is stored in your body. So when you finally get a moment to stop, to rest, to be still, that tension is still there. So what I'm inviting you to do is to consciously, intentionally let that tension go. Consciously and intentionally relax your body, soften your body. Let go of the armor that you've been wearing. Feel the ground beneath you, the solid earth, the roots of the trees, the rocks, the stones. You are rooted to this earth, and the earth is rooting you, holding you, grounding you. Bring your attention to your toes. Are they cold? Are they hot? Are they tingling? Are they numb? Are they moving? Are they still? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your toes, toes being the furthest part of your body from your heart, from your center, acknowledge them without judgment. Observe them without evaluation. Just notice what's happening in your toes. Bring your attention now to your feet. Are your feet cold? Are your feet hot? Are they sore? Do they feel the roughness of the ground beneath them? Can you feel the pressure of the soles of your feet against the ground? Do you feel the shape of your feet? Do you feel the separation between your big toe and your other for toes? Do you feel the space between your toes? Do you feel the space between your heel and your arch and the ball of your foot? Notice these sensations without judgment, without evaluation. Just notice what's happening in your feet. Bring your attention now to your ankles, to your calves, to your knees. What do you feel in your lower legs? Is there soreness? Is there fatigue? Is there tingling? Is there warmth? Is there heat? Just notice what's happening in your lower legs. Bring your awareness now to your thighs, to your hips, to your pelvis. What do you feel in this area of your body? There may be some soreness here. There may be some fatigue here. Maybe you feel the pressure of your thighs against each other. Maybe you feel the pressure of your leg hair. Maybe you feel the separation between your legs. Maybe you feel the connection where your leg meets your torso. Maybe you feel the warmth of your inner thighs. Maybe you feel the coolness of your outer thighs. Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your thighs, your hips, and your pelvis, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening down there. Bring your attention now to your belly. What do you feel in your stomach? Do you feel the rise and fall of your diaphragm? Do you feel your stomach muscles? Do you feel the separation between your stomach and your chest? Do you feel the pressure of your clothes on your stomach? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your belly, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening in your belly. Bring your attention now to your chest. What do you feel in your chest? Do you feel the rise and fall of your lungs? Do you feel the pressure of your ribs expanding and contracting? Do you feel your chest expanding and contracting? Do you feel the weight of your chest? Do you feel the separation between your chest and your stomach? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your chest, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening in your chest. Bring your attention now to your shoulders, to your arms. What do you feel in your upper body? Do you feel the weight of your shoulders? Do you feel the pressure of your arms against your sides? Do you feel the separation between your biceps and your triceps? Do you feel the warmth of your skin? Do you feel the coolness of your skin? Do you feel the pressure of your clothing on your skin? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your arms and your shoulders, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening in your arms and your shoulders. Bring your attention now to your hands and your fingers. What do you feel in your hands and your fingers? Do you feel the coolness of the night air on your fingers? Do you feel the pressure of your fingers against each other? Do you feel the weight of your hands? Do you feel the separation between your fingers? Do you feel the separation between your hand and your forearm? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your hands and your fingers, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening in your hands and your fingers. Bring your attention now to your neck. What do you feel in your neck? Do you feel the weight of your head? Do you feel the pressure of your collarbone on your neck? Do you feel the coolness of the night air on your neck? Do you feel the roughness of your shirt on your neck? Do you feel the smoothness of your skin on your neck? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your neck, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening in your neck. Bring your attention now to your face, to your eyes, to your ears. What do you feel in your head? Do you feel the pressure of your skull? Do you feel the coolness of the night air on your face? Do you feel the dryness of the night air on your lips? Do you feel the warmth of your breath on your lips? Do you feel the shape of your nose? Do you feel the shape of your ears? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your head, your face, your ears, your eyes, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening in your head, in your face, in your eyes, in your ears. And finally, bring your awareness to your mouth, to your tongue. What do you feel in your mouth? Do you feel the pressure of your teeth on your tongue? Do you feel the separation between your lips? Do you feel the moisture of your saliva? Do you feel the roughness of your tongue? Do you feel the smoothness of your gums? Whatever sensations you're experiencing in your mouth, in your tongue, in your lips, notice them without judgment. Just notice what's happening in your mouth, on your tongue, between your lips. When you're ready, slowly begin to wiggle your fingers and toes. Slowly begin to move your body to stretch. And as you move, notice the sensations that come up in your body. As you move, notice the feelings that come up inside of you. When you're ready, slowly begin to open your eyes and take in the sights around you. Take in the beauty of the world. And as you do, know that you are loved, you are cherished, you are valuable, you are important. You've traveled far tonight, farther than most ever would. And now it's time to rest. Good night, traveler. Sleep well.